You're telling the truth. We'll use it to get out of here.
The truth? Son, how can you believe...
Don't ever call me that. For 20 years I dreamed about my father. A man to look up to. A hero who sacrificed his life to save his family. It was your family you sacrificed. You threw us away so you could go knock around the galaxy.
That's not what happened.
No? Did I imagine the orphanage? The foster homes where nobody wanted me? Tell me, Dad. Am I making this up?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another GospelX, or Gospel According to the X-Men, where Henry and I continue to discuss...
Talk about the X-Men.
Talk about the X-Men of the animated series, the 1990s animated series. Some of you were not even born yet. But welcome. We are so glad that you can join us today as we embark on another episode entitled Orphan's Edge. Orphan's End. My apologies. All right. So without further ado, customarily, we allow Henry to start us off and give us a synopsis of this episode.
This is actually a very interesting episode because there was a little bit of foreshadowing during the Phoenix saga. Remember when Phoenix went and she prevented Cyclops from blasting Corsair?
Yeah.
Afterwards, we kind of find out that, hey, Corsair is actually Cyclops' father.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually know until this episode. And it happens in the most, Deus Ex Machina way. Corsair so happens to have a locket with his family's photos in it, and then he's in it, and then Cyclops so happened to open it up and find out. And we get the scene where Cyclops is just so disappointed in finding out that this space pirate is actually his father, this scoundrelly space pirate. And it just completely blows the image of his father just out of the park. He thought that his father was a hero. His father was a military person who, followed the rules. And he's very
straight and narrow.
Good, like straight and narrow, straight arrow, very moral, very good. And this is his memories of him at a young age, right? And his father died sacrificing himself to save his family. And then he finds out that this space pirate who he's met before he doesn't like is actually his father. The rest of the episode plays out where he's struggling to believe the things that others say. The police, Shi'ar police is saying about his father that he's a criminal, that he's a kidnapper, and believing his father, who he says that he's doing this to protect Janda from the cops. The cops are crooked, and there's a struggle there where his own personal feelings are getting in the way of his objectivity throughout the episode. In the end of the episode, Cyclops finds out that his father was right. He was protecting it. He had his own self-serving means on the side, but on the whole, he was doing the right thing, and they kind of reconcile at the end.
It's interesting you mentioned too, the self-serving. That self-serving thing kind of threw in the wrench for Corsair to prove that he was Cyclops' father, right? It's like, come on, the last thing you want to mention to your non-trusting son is that you also are doing it for profit.
Yeah,
right?
But options were limited. If you really want your son to trust you, I don't think lying to him would have helped build that trust.
Yeah, I guess so. But why throw that?
You kind of have to come clean. And we talked a little bit about before when we were talking about this is, children tend to have an idealized image of their parents when they're growing up. Their parents can do no wrong. They know everything. They're awesome. They're like basically superheroes.
Yeah. And we Googled that term, and it's called projection. That the children, like kids, have a tendency to project an image of their parents in their minds, and to say that this is what my parent is. but not really. Yeah, keep going. Sorry, Henry, go ahead.
No worries. Yeah. So the kids project this idealized image of their parents, and it refers back to themselves. So Cyclops gained a lot of his identity from that projection of his father, of being the straight and narrow, that moral good person. And he says, I'm a good person because my father was such a good person.
Right. And I'm honoring that by being this person, right? Like so Cyclops had this projection of this perfect, straight and narrow, law-abiding citizen, and therefore influence how he behaves. And then when he figured out that Corsair is absolutely, completely the opposite, he just couldn't handle it objectively, like you said, but more like an emotional wall just built up to just deny it completely, right?
Yeah, and I think that when we're watching this episode, you kind of get a very quick, very fast kind of sequence of events of what happens usually when kids grow up is you figure out that, hey, your parents aren't perfect people.
Yeah.
You figure out that this idealized image of your parents, that they can do no wrong, that they're awesome. Like you start saying, hey, these are people with flaws as well. They can have temper tantrums. They lose their tempers. They can come sometimes to be morally compromised as well. And to expand on that, we were talking about how we don't just project images onto our parents, but on society as a whole, maybe even Christians.
Even our friends, right? And even our spouses, right? Like we have these projections of this human being that everyone should be the same as us, right? Like everybody should think the same as us. Everybody should behave the same as us. So sometimes what comes out of our mouths is, how can you possibly think that way? Right? That's basically a projection of ourselves onto a person. When we say, how can you possibly think that way? Or how can you behave that way? Or how can you possibly say that or make that decision? Basically, what we're saying is, you're not behaving the way I'm behaving, right? So we're projecting that onto others. Yeah. So so not just parents, but also to each other, to our friends, to our spouses. Yeah.
Not even that, even God.
Sometimes, yeah.
We even have expectations of God, and how come God's not acting the way God should act, right?
Exactly. We project that as well. And unfortunately, when we say that, we're actually just projecting ourselves onto God as well, right? God, how come you didn't, do this? Because that's exactly
you're supposed to be good.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would think, right? How come you don't think that way, right? Yeah. So I guess our job now is to offer a Christian perspective, a theological perspective of how we see the gospel at play here. Well, some of you keeners out there know the New Testament quite well. So full stop, we'll just say Jesus. Just kidding. Just kidding. What we're going to do, I think this really brings to a point of what the Israelites, when Jesus came into the scene when he was in his 20s, and he came with fanfare, but then he started to forgive sinners, taking care of the worst of the worst, the low of the low, and also dining with them, and then having conversations with the chief tax collector, and just doing stuff that wasn't expected of the Israelites, because the Israelites projected a king onto Jesus, their version of king. And as some of you may know throughout our sermons in Crucible Church, that projection is more like a Captain America projection, right? They go, no, this is we want a king that will, save us from the Romans, right? From the Roman power. And yet Jesus did the opposite. He wasn't this military guy that they expected. They projected a military leader, yet Jesus didn't fulfill that, and therefore they crucified him. So what lesson do we learn from that is that taking from that, we need to also look at ourselves and say, what are we projecting onto others? What are we saying to people? When we listen to the news, when we have conversations with people, or even our loved ones, even our parents, right? We go, how could you possibly do that, right? Or how could you possibly think that way? We have to look at ourselves and say, am I projecting myself onto others? And is that the loving way to do? Because if Jesus did the same thing back on the Jews, he would have just forget about the whole process of saving them, right? But he didn't. right? He didn't project the perfect Christian onto the Jews. Instead, if he did that, he would have ignored them. But he didn't. He didn't project anything. He didn't even project himself onto them. What he did was that he loved them and just learned from their perspective. And that's something that we need to learn as well. Sort of like Cyclops finally waking up and listening to the Catwoman, like that woman that looks like a cat, but seems like got, whatever. And it's like, how she said, you should listen to your father sometime.
You should have a little bit of faith
in your father, right? And then so it's like, it's something for us too, that we should have a little bit of faith in God to let us know, to understand that person better who we are talking to, instead of just projecting ourselves onto them and just say, oh, they're not like me, see you later type of thing. Rather, like have a little bit of faith in God, that to say, maybe I need to learn more, or be more open to receive more of what they could tell me, right? As opposed to just writing them off. Yeah, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely true. I think it's mostly a reminder for us that whenever you have an idealized image of person, a group, a friend, family member, you say that they can do no wrong, they're always right, you're gonna get disappointed.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you go and say, okay, this political party is good, right? And they can do no wrong, and then it's like they do something wrong. Everyone is no one's infallible. Everyone is a human being that makes mistakes, and when you hold on to those kind of projections and you have then those expectations on other people, then eventually it's going to come back, and you're going to get.
Yeah, especially if you continue to ignore them too, right? They ignore those. That your projections are wrong, and that like we see it now, right? Case in point, that even though there's so many scandals and so many things that this person has done wrong, they still have that projection on them, right? And look at where it's gotten themselves into. All right, we won't go into that political thing. We'll stop right there. And thank you all for joining us in another episode of GospelX. My name is Jonathan. This is Henry. If you want more information, go to our website at www.companyofdisciples.com. Till next time, have a wonderful week.